Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Turfgrass Epistemology. My name is TravisShaddox. If you're here, you may be wondering, how do we know what we know about turfgrass science? That's what Turfgrass Epistemology is all about. And we explore scientific literature. Sometimes we have fun on Tuesday mornings. We had fun this morning on a video commentary. Seems like those shows get the most views when I comment on videos on Tuesday morning. I understand the science can be a little dry. So, and on top of that, I'm dry. So it's not exactly the most exciting thing to listen to scientific literature and go through it. But that's what we do on Monday mornings for the members only, and then Tuesday evenings. It's a long form. It's a hang out and listen and read the article maybe while you're listening to my comments, or just, drive your car, sit on the golf cart, whatever it is, hang out and just listen. I do break up the podcast into small 1 or 2 minute sections, and I post those sometime later, occasionally. I have one a day, but who knows whether or not I'll clip something that is of interest to you. But I try to make it a little bit more manageable by breaking up this long video into bite-sized portions. But I'm so far behind. I try to do one a day, and I'm still like, God, I think I'm a month back on the videos. I'm right now, I'm breaking up the video from maybe a month ago. So who knows what I'm going to do in terms of keeping up with that. But anyway, welcome one, welcome all. So I'll answer one question in the chat real quick. We're going to get to PGRs tonight. We're going to talk about Dr. Irvin's paper. I believe this was his graduate work, if I'm not mistaken, at Colorado State with Dr. Koski. So it's a good paper. I want to go over. I want to have time to go over. We have plenty of time. It's an easy paper to go over. The results are pretty straightforward, and his conclusions and his discussion are extremely good. Very, very, very succinct, and they're supported by the results. So I really appreciate what he wrote in the latter part of this paper. So I'll go over that. And then before I forget, one of the members, I can't recall this morning who sent me an email, but some of you guys want me to go over some PGRs that are available in lawn care, particularly at new. There's not a whole lot of literature on ANU right now. At least not that I know of. I don't really track down. I don't have a memory bank of PGR literature, but somebody sent me a paper on PGRs or ANU. So I'll go over that. I was going to switch from PGRs. I'll go over this ANU paper on Monday morning for the members only. And then I'm going to switch to some other topic. I've been going over PGRs for the most of November. And then I'll go to a variety of topics throughout the remainder of this year. So thank you for sending me that article. You guys are always welcome to send me articles. I may or may not go over the article, but if you want an article that is of interest to you, particularly if you're a member, send it to me and I'll do what I can to go over it. So the question in the chat is 3 or 4 most effective treatments for cool season grasses, and I'm not really sure what you mean by that, Mike. And then you replied and said, I'm looking to cut through the BS and have a great lawn in a few simple steps. Obviously, frequent water and mowing will be included in my regime. So what I would say, first of all, is, let me see if I can even get it up. There's a sound bit for you. If you want to cut that out. Let me see if I can find the PowerPoint presentation that I do have sitting around here somewhere. What did I do with that thing? What I'd recommend you do for any plant, but particularly, that's not it. Particularly for turfgrass, because that's where I spend most of my time in research, is to be aware of this first. And I think the senior members on the channel know exactly what I'm going to put up. If I can get it open. I wasn't really prepared, but since you asked a question and I'm interested in it, is this. Let's see if I have this queued up. I do. Okay, so if you're asking for the 3 or 4 most important things, Michael, for cool season, it's the same thing for warm season. Probably the same thing for your tomatoes, anything, any plant. These are what you should follow first, and these are the priorities that you should consider first on any plant, particularly in turfgrass. And that is number one. That didn't work. That is number one is water. So you mentioned water, you're going to water frequently, but watering frequently may not be a good thing. Okay, so the problem with water is not normally too little water, it's commonly too much water. Okay, so the most important thing I would say for cool season grasses or warm season grasses is make sure you're applying the appropriate amount of water. Okay, so if you want to know an irrigation schedule, the irrigation that I use is I leave my irrigation off completely. Don't ever turn it on until there's been a few days go by that there hasn't been any rain. I start to see some signs of water stress, incipient signs of water stress in the turf, and the forecast doesn't have any water the next day or thereafter, 2-3 days after. Then I'll turn the water on. That's my approach to moisture management. May not be logistically possible in many situations, but I have a feel for the environment that I'm in, the forecast of water. I'm always looking at the weather app on my phone, and it hasn't rained in 3 or 4 days. It's not going to rain in 3 or 4 more days, and my turf grass is very likely going to be wilting from water stress. Then I'll apply some water. To leave it on all the time is probably not wise. The only other method you could use not the only other method, but one other method you could use for water management is to apply water based upon reference evapotranspiration, which is generally somewhere between 70 and 80% of the previous week's ET. So if you have a weather station near you, which you do, whether you know it or not, you may not know how to access it, but you can access the data from a lot of these weather stations. And let's say the average evapotranspiration was, for that week was, say, 0.7 inches of water, and it didn't rain at all, then you want to apply about 70 or 80% of that reference ET for that week. But if it did rain 0.7 inches and the reference ET was 0.7 inches, then you wouldn't want to water at all. So that's the one thing that I'd make sure you spend a lot of time thinking about is how you're going to manage your water, because that's the most influential factor in cool season and warm season grasses. And then light. You can't really do anything about light except for when you're in home lawns or you're in golf courses where trees can be a problem. So if you have dead or dying trees or diseased trees that need to be removed or need to be thinned, then you can consider removing those to alleviate some shade issues. But light in this particular graph is to really be more, in this figure is to be more aware of the influence of seasonal changes in light when you're going from summer into winter or from winter into summer. Those changes in seasonal light can have a different impact on your plant. So what I mean by that is there could be stresses that you don't see in the turf grass because the light and the water are ideal. But as the light changes from the summer into the winter, let's take warm season grass. Well, you asked about cool season grasses. So in cool season grasses, as it's going from, say, fall into deep winter when it's really getting dark, then that little bit of light change can have an impact on your plant, and problems can manifest themselves at that time of year where it didn't manifest itself a month earlier or 2 months earlier, simply because it's more stressed due to reduced light. So in warm season grasses, it would be moving from summer into fall and fall into winter. Okay, so just be aware of that. You can't do anything about seasonal changes in light other than to be aware of it, but you can do something about, why am I having problems with this? I'm hitting the wrong button, sorry. You can do something about light if you have dead or diseased trees. You can remove those, or you can remove other trees if it's illegal and you want to do that. I mean, it's up to you. And then the other thing is temperature. Again, this is more seasonal than anything, to be aware of the seasonal changes in temperature. They can change, the stresses in your grass can show up more. Problems that would not have shown up in the summertime for warm season grasses might show up in the fall and the winter because it's colder, and vice versa. Problems in the summer for cool season grasses, like diseases or whatever, might show up. It might show up because it's stressed out due to high temperatures, where that plant might be able to grow through that stress in the spring or the fall when the temperatures are more ideal for cool season grass growth. And then injury due to abiotic or biotic pests. So like biotic pests would be like nematodes or fungi or anything like that, diseases. And then abiotic things would be things like cart traffic or foot traffic or things like that. All these things influence the plant growth. And then at the top of this, and the least influential, the least likely to be a problem is fertile soil. So you want to know the 2 or 3 things that I would do. I'd be aware of water, be aware of light and temperature first, be aware of any injuries that might be going on in terms of pests, insects, diseases, nematodes, anything like that could be damaging, and anything like your car or foot traffic or anything like that could be injuring the turf. And then after that, I'd start looking at fertile soil. In the world of injury, by the way, abiotic injury is mower injury. That's the most harmful action on turfgrass is mower injury. Having sharp blades, using real mowers if you really want a fine cut rather than rotary mowers, that's in the injury category. So the mower is deeply influential on the quality of cut and the quality of the turfgrass can look like because you're having all those frayed ends rather than a really crisp, sharp edge. And then you have fertile soil. Okay, so that's what I would consider in terms of that. And I know it's very general in its approach, but I don't condone really going and doing a bunch of soil sampling and doing a bunch of, we're going to apply 2 or 3 pounds of nitrogen and all this phosphorus, potassium, all those other things until you've checked off all those boxes below it. And then when you've checked off all those boxes below it, then you can move into my world of soil fertility and NPKs and micronutrients and all soil testing and all that stuff. But as important as it is and as interesting as it is to me, that little triangle at the top, it's really the least impactful. All the other things are generally the issue beforehand. And so that's what I use to diagnose problems, but it's also what I would do in terms of prioritizing resources to result in a good quality turf. I prioritize my resources on water, making sure the pump's working and you're putting out the right amount and you're putting out the right quality of water and not putting out too much and all these things. That's extremely important. Okay. So that's what I would do that's my answer to that. Okay. So let's move into I guess now the second to last PGR paper. I was going to have this be the last paper, but a member emailed me an article that I'll go over on Monday morning. And before I forget, please, if you take a second, just right now, everybody just take literally 3 seconds and just hit the subscribe button. It really helps the channel out a lot. Like the video. And I don't know what this does exactly, but if you hit the bell icon, I think it will notify your phone or notify you that I've started a new broadcast. And so you won't miss out on any new broadcasts. I broadcast live on Monday and Tuesday mornings at 10 a.m. and then Tuesday evenings at 9 p.m. And if you're interested in supporting the channel in a different way and you want to support turfgrass research, you can always consider being a member and you'll have access to the Monday morning show. And that's all I have. Okay, so let's get into the article. So the article today is an article from an author I've had on the show before. And I may be mistaken, but I believe he's now I don't know, I shouldn't say this unless I'm sure, but I'm pretty sure he's now the dean. So congratulations to him if that's true. And here we go. The title of the paper is Kentucky Bluegrass Growth Response to Trinexapac-ethyl, Traffic, and Nitrogen. So the idea behind this was brought up on another paper, and it's brought up on many papers, where the use of a PGR like trinexapac-ethyl can reduce and will very likely reduce the vertical growth rate and the clipping yield of your turf. And there's a concept that it will in turn result in increased lateral growth. So the runners and tillers across the surface may increase because the vertical grass growth decreases. And if that is the case, and that was mentioned at the end of one of the conclusions or one of the paper, I think it was on Monday morning, and it's in other papers as well. And so if that is the case, during traffic where the turf grass is damaged from cleats, like soccer cleats or football cleats, with the application of trinexapac in that case, if it's going to increase tiller density, would that result in increased recovery from traffic damage? Okay. And so that's what this paper is going to look at. Growth responses, trinexapac-ethyl, traffic, and nitrogen. There's going to be a nitrogen component and a trinexapac, which is a plant growth regulator, and then they're going to do that under 2 different traffic simulations. Okay? So here we go. Synthetic PGRs have long been touted as management tools to reduce labor, mowing frequency, clippings collected, and equipment wear and tear. Before I forget, this was published in 2001 in Crop Science. So please consider going to crops.org or agronomy.org or soils.org and reviewing some of the literature. You can read all these abstracts for free. Some of you have actually become members of the tri-societies, and now you have access to all these papers. And so that's where this is published. I want to make sure that's clear. Okay. In the past, widespread use of plant growth regulators has been limited by problems with turfgrass discoloration and reduced quality under abiotic stress. Trinexapac-ethyl is a commonly used turfgrass PGR. It's commonly known by the brand name Primo, but there's other brand names now, that suppress laminar cell elongation by inhibiting the 3-beta-hydroxylase conversion of gibberellic acid 20 to the physiologically active GA1. I've read this now, the same 2 or 3 sentences in the introduction of these papers, and I still don't have a clue what any of that means. Like, apparently it just it blocks the conversion from an inactive form of gibberellic acid into the active form, apparently is what it does. But I don't know. I'm not a plant physiologist. Trinexapac-ethyl appears to offer the turf manager a PGR that reduces vertical shoot growth without reductions in turf quality. And I'd say under most conditions, you're going to reduce vertical shoot growth and result in as good or better quality. I mean, not always, but in many cases, that's going to be the case. I mean, that's pretty well established. PGRs can be your friend, very much so. A number of researchers have reported that trinexapac-ethyl reduces cool season turfgrass shoot growth. And he has a couple of papers here. However, limited published research is available regarding other morphological and physiological responses of turfgrass to trinexapac-ethyl, such as photosynthesis, carbohydrate partitioning and storage, rooting, tiller density, traffic tolerance, and N rates. We've gone over some of this. Photosynthesis was the paper on Monday morning, and then carbohydrate partitioning. What he's talking about by that, like that, is he's talking about moving carbohydrates from the roots to the leaves, or having an effect on that, or from the leaves to the roots, storage in the roots, changes in root architecture, and all these things. And I believe the paper on Monday morning was from Dr. Beasley, and I want to say the photosynthesis effect was not an effect on the actual photosynthesis internally in the plant. There was not like a metabolic change to some photosynthetic process. What they found was that the canopy, the number of leaves, essentially, the number of locations available for photosynthesis was the cause of the change in photosynthetic rate. If I remember correctly, that's what they concluded. So there can be an effect. It's just because the canopy is more dense, apparently. It has been reported that trinexapac-ethyl does not negatively affect cool or warm season photosynthesis. So there he is. So, they had 2 other papers then. Photosynthate, not utilized for leaf expansion during plant growth regulator induced suppression, may be redirected to other sink tissues such as stems and roots. So that's what they're talking about in carbohydrate partitioning. That's what they're referring to. Since the accumulation of carbohydrates is greatest during periods of minimal shoot growth, it seems reasonable to assume that shoot growth suppression caused by trinexapac may result in an increase in carbohydrate content in stems or root tissue. These additional carbohydrates may be used for resumption of enhancement of longitudinal shoot growth once the suppression effects of trinexapac have dissipated, or they may be used for enhanced root or tiller growth. So basically what they're saying is there's a relationship in the plant, a function of the plant really, where photosynthates that are created or absorbed out of carbon dioxide in the leaf are those carbohydrates are needed in the plant for various metabolic functions. But when they're not immediately used, they're stored, and they're normally stored in stems and in roots. Well, if you're going to suppress the vertical shoot growth of the plant, it may not need all those carbohydrates, and it might result in storage of those carbohydrates in other locations. And if that's the case, then those carbohydrates might be available to be used whenever the suppression effect of the PGR is alleviated. And that's the case in almost every study I've shown, where there will be a suppression for the first 4 or 5 weeks, followed by an expansion of growth, where the growth rate will be greater than the treatments that did not receive the PGR at all once the PGR wears off. So that's kind of what they're referring to and talking about here. At present, we are not aware of any publication concerning the effect of trinexapac on Kentucky bluegrass tiller density. So that's what they're going to talk about, is the tillers, the runners across the surface. A further benefit of enhanced tiller density due to trinexapac may be increased traffic tolerance. Traffic causes wear injury to turfgrass foliage and compaction of the soil. Wear injury is often due to a physical abrasion and tearing of above ground plant parts. So that is the little triangle of the turfgrass risk factors. That's the injury area. So I don't care what fertility is in the soil. If you got 200-pound linebackers and people, football players running all over the turf and tearing it up, it doesn't matter what the soil fertility is. Or the cart's going off the end of the cart path, or golfers doing all the traffic up and down the green. And I mean, all that damage, abiotic damage, is in the injury box. That's the reason it's more common to see that as a cause of what you're seeing rather than some infertility of the soil. Okay. It's very common, including mowers and all the other equipment that we run across that damage the turf grass. Greater applied nitrogen will increase above ground biomass and should increase recovery from traffic, but could have mixed effects on turfgrass traffic tolerance. And he goes through some various studies. Sometimes you see a response. Most of the time you see a benefit to applying nitrogen to increase the growth in terms of traffic recovery, but not always. Obviously, traffic will damage turf plants and reduce what is the LAI? Leaf area index is usually what that is. What is LAI? Leaf area index, yeah. Obviously, traffic will damage turf plants and reduce the leaf area index to the point where nitrogen fertilization will aid substantially in recovery of density. However, it is not clear what effect higher relative N rates may have on traffic tolerance of mature turfs with a leaf area index of 3 or greater. Given the available evidence, we hypothesize that trinexapac-induced reductions in shoot growth may result in increased tillering, increased rooting, and quality equivalent to untreated turf while receiving reduced annual applied in. So they're saying that you can, they're hypothesizing that you could see this under reduced nitrogen applications. You wouldn't need as much nitrogen. We further hypothesize that tillering and rooting increases may result in improved traffic tolerance. Therefore, the objectives were to investigate the extent and duration of trinexapac-ethyl-induced shoot growth suppression of Kentucky bluegrass when applied at different times of the year, and determine any interactive effects that traffic or nitrogen treatments may have on such suppression. Pretty straightforward. And number 2 is to investigate if trinexapac-induced reductions in shoot growth affecting tillering, rooting, and quality of Kentucky bluegrass, and determine any interactive effects of the traffic and nitrogen treatments may have on these performance variables. As always, these objectives aren't written in a falsifiable way. I wish we would do that. It's very easy to rewrite these and write them in a falsifiable way, but for whatever reason, a lot of authors don't follow Karl Popper's, standard, highly accepted recommendations. I don't know why they don't do that, but they just don't. Anyway, so the materials and methods, the experimental design. The experiment was initiated on April 20th of 1995 on 3-year-old stand of New Star Kentucky bluegrass at the Colorado State University Horticultural Field Research Center. The research center is located 10 kilometers northeast of Fort Collins, Colorado. That's where my family lives, in Fort Collins. I actually applied to Colorado State when I got out of when I was at OSU. I graduated from OSU. And then last semester or last year, I applied to Washington State, Colorado State, and Florida. And I got into all 3. But at the time, I didn't know that really in graduate school, you can apply to graduate school if you want to, but you're not really going to apply to the graduate school and get in. You need to apply to the professor. The professor's the one who's going to say yay or nay in agriculture. And you need to have a professor that has funding. So I ended up going to University of Florida. Anyway, I love Colorado State and Fort Collins. That whole area, it almost seems like a winter version of a park at Disney World or something. Their public parks are immaculate. I mean, they look fake. I mean, if you put a public park like that in the middle of Lexington, Kentucky, it'd be packed because the parks around here are awful. They're old and worn down. And in fact, they just passed a new I don't know, penny sales tax or something to help increase some of the parks in Lexington on this last election. Thank goodness. They're awful here. You go to Fort Collins, it's like a public park heaven. I don't know what they do there, but man, that place is nice. It is really nice. I'll be there in June. My niece is getting married, so I'll be up in Fort Collins in June of this coming year. The factors of this fixed effects were trinexapac-ethyl, traffic, and nitrogen levels. The main plots were either treated or not treated with trinexapac, and I believe this is 4 ounce, 0.27 kilograms per hectare. I don't quote me on that, but I believe that's 4 ounces per acre. 3 times each year at 6-week intervals. Each main plot was then split vertically, and half of these subplots received periodic traffic events. Each subplot was also divided into 4 subplots, and 4 annual nitrogen levels were randomly applied to these subplots. Artificial traffic was applied periodically to 1/2 of each main plot, with a 200 kilogram, 76 centimeter wide turf roller modified by bolting rubber soccer cleat soles to the roller. If you've never seen like traffic damage simulators, everybody kind of has a different mechanism and a way of doing it. I mean, as long as it's repeatable and consistent from, time to time, event to event. But you've seen cleats on there. You'll see rubber tires with like bolts on them, and you see all kinds of stuff, trying to figure out some way to simulate traffic. So that's how they did it. They did it with rubber soccer cleat soles. I guess that's about as close as you can get to an actual soccer cleat using an actual soccer cleat. Yearly nitrogen rate was the third factor in the experiment. The end source used was Neutralene. Now they're going to have a problem with the nitrogen on this study, and they're going to postulate as to why they didn't see what they expected to see. And what I would, as we go through it, you'll kind of have your own opinion. But what I would say is that what they postulate at the end very well may be the case. But I think it's probably more likely that they chose an extremely inefficient and very, very slow nitrogen source in this Neutralene granular, and they did it 100%. So I'm not a fan of Neutralene or nitroform, or I just say methylene ureas or urea formaldehydes, because one, they're extremely expensive on a per pound of N basis and a per day of response basis. Well, that's the main reason. And 2, the response in this particular study, what you would expect to see, you don't see it. And I'm like, well, you probably shouldn't be applying 100% methylene urea or urea formaldehyde. I mean, you should have had some soluble in there, but regardless, whatever. I digress. Neutralene is a control-release nitrogen source containing 5% urea to 20.5% slowly available methylene urea polymers. And then it goes through water and soluble nitrogen. Nitrogen was applied at 1 pound, 2 pounds, 3 pounds, and 4 pounds per year, splitting the subplots horizontally each year. 1 pound was applied on April 20th. Another 1 pound was applied to the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th levels on June 20th. Another 1 pound was applied to the 3rd, 4th, and 3rd and 4th levels on August 20th. And the final 1 pound was applied to the 4th level on October 20th. The experimental area was irrigated every 3 days to replace 100% of the Penman-Monteith estimated reference grass evapotranspiration. Now, I've never applied water that way. I don't know. I'm not familiar with this Penman-Monteith model. Down here, they say it has shown that the Penman-Monteith equation, which accounts for elevation, geographic location, and crop height, provides better evapotranspiration estimates in northern Colorado than other commonly used equations, with no citation for that. I'd actually want to see the citation, not because I doubt him, because I'd like to see the citation to be able to read the citation that shows that. I've never heard of that model, or maybe this is. Oh no, they do quote it up here, Meckham, 1996. So they quoted at the beginning of the sentence. I'm sorry. So they did have it. I've just never used that, but they're still using some sort of logic to it. They're using some sort of model to apply water based upon evapotranspiration. And earlier today, I answered this gentleman's question. 70-80% of the reference evapotranspiration of the prior week is generally considered okay to do that. Perhaps this model is a better model. I don't know. The estimates on water applications were made daily based on data from a weather station located 4 meters from the southern border of the experimental site. And so that's how they determined how they're going to apply water. So again, they're not applying water every day over and over and over. It says every 3 days, but it was to replace a specific amount of evapotranspirated water. Okay, it wasn't just applying 1/4 inch of water every time or 1/2 inch of water every time. That's not how we water things in research, because we know that water application is going to have a massive influence on our treatments, on our study. And we want to minimize anything we can minimize, any variable we can minimize that would not be a result of the treatment effect. And we know water is going to have a massive influence on the whole plant. So we try to do what we can to manage that very closely. And that goes to the gentleman, Michael B's comment in the chat at the beginning of this show tonight. That's what I would do. I would spend a lot of my time and resources making sure I have the right heads, I have the right volume going out. I'm doing an irrigation audit at least once every 2 years, if not once a year. And in Colorado, where this study was done, a lot of the HOAs, at least in Fort Collins, the public, I don't know if it's the public parks or there's an office in Fort Collins that will do irrigation audits for free for certain HOAs. I believe it's for all HOAs. And then they even do it for homes. They'll do an irrigation audit for you for free. You don't even have to pay for it. And they'll give you back the data and the information. And you can make an adjustment to your irrigation heads or the time or the volume or whatever the case is to become more efficient with your water usage. So kudos to Fort Collins for providing that service. A lot of people don't know about it, but look it up. Your city might provide that for you as well for free. You can do it yourself with little catch cans around your yard. It's not overly complicated. But if the city will do it and they're experts at it, let them do it. And, thank your legislature for providing that service with your own tax dollars. Variables sampled. Clipping dry weights were obtained each week. Weekly visual quality was rated on a scale of 1 to 9, where 9 is an ideal turf area, 6 corresponds to a minimal acceptable turf, and 1 indicated turf that was completely dead or dormant. Root samples were obtained using a truck-mounted grid hydraulic soil probe. And the only reason I showed that is I've never used that. I would love to have that. A truck-mounted hydraulic soil probe, so I don't have to go out there and do it by hand. You kidding me? Show me that. I'll do that. I wish I would have known about that when I was doing this work. It's been fantastic. 3 depths were sampled, 0 to 20, 21 to 40, and 41 to 60 centimeters. They don't show a lot of bulk density stuff in here, but they measured bulk. They used a bulk density sampling tool to obtain a soil core, and then they used that core to measure tiller density counts. So inside that core, the area of that core, the top of that core was known, and then they just measured the tillers inside that area. And they said that bulk density was measured. I don't know. Yeah, it says somewhere. And it says the tillers were counted by hand, and the 730 centimeter volume of soil was oven dried and weighed to obtain bulk density. But I don't remember them showing anything like that. So that's it. That's the setting. They're in Colorado. They're in north. If you don't know where Fort Collins is, in north central Colorado, about, an hour north of Denver. It's probably closer to Cheyenne than it is to Denver. And they're doing it on Kentucky Bluegrass. They're measuring trinexapac-ethyl and nitrogen rates, and they're simultaneously doing that under traffic. So you're going to see what happens in terms of quality and tiller count with the inclusion of trinexapac when the turfgrass is being damaged due to soccer damage or simulated soccer damage. The results: trinexapac clipping dry weight. Trinexapac-ethyl reduced Kentucky Bluegrass clipping production by an average of 69% during the first 6 weeks of application cycle 95. Traffic treatments did not begin until the second application in 95. Analysis of variance indicates that the traffic was the primary treatment responsible for reduction in clippings, with trinexapac-ethyl being the next strongest factor in N rate, while still significantly affecting clipping production, having the smallest impact across the 6-week treatment cycle. So once again, for the I don't even think we've ever gone over a PGR study that the PGRs did not reduce clipping yields. They will almost always reduce clipping yields, and it almost always, at the labeled rate, will almost always last for about 4 or 5 weeks. That tends to be the length of response. Okay, and at the end of this, he's going to have a recommendation, which I think is very good, a very well-worded recommendation. I highlighted it, so make sure I don't forget it. So what I want to show here, this is going to be the clipping dry weight. Let's see, do I have any other thing on clipping dry weights? Yeah, let me just read this, and I'm going to go up to this chart. The trinexapac-ethyl and traffic reduced clippings relative to traffic alone. So trinexapac-ethyl plus traffic reduced it compared just to traffic alone at 2 weeks after treatment, 3 weeks after treatment during May and June of 97. We're talking about a 55% or 34% reduction. No reductions occurred during the May-June 96 cycle. Trinexapac and traffic reduced clippings at 2, 4, 5, and 6 weeks after treatments relative to traffic alone during the 97 cycle. No reductions due to trinexapac and traffic were noted during the August to September 96 cycle. So what they're talking about is this up here, this table that I've highlighted. And what I want to show here, you're going to see 2 or 3 tables. And what you're going to see on the far left is trinexapac, and it has yes or no. And then it has traffic, yes or no. And the title is trinexapac-ethyl times traffic times N-rate effects on average weekly Kentucky bluegrass clipping dry weight. So this is an effect on the actual clipping yields. And over here, we're going to see a 1 pound of nitrogen, 2 pounds of nitrogen, 3 pounds of nitrogen, or 4 pounds of nitrogen. And here you have the May through July and the August through September treatment cycles. I wanted to point out, so the no trinexapac and no traffic is really kind of the control, okay? And you'll see, so it's going to be the highest amount of clipping dry weights is the no traffic and no trinexapac. You'll see A's across the top here, all in green that I've highlighted. In the first cycle, you see when you have no traffic and you have trinexapac or no trinexapac, there was no difference at the 1 pound N rate. Okay, remember it started just a couple of weeks before this, I guess it was, I don't remember. But then after that, at the 2 pound N rate and beyond, trinexapac did result in a reduction at any N rate above 1 pound in the May to July. Now in the August to September, of course, you see a reduction across the board with trinexapac, regardless of the amount of nitrogen you put out. You always saw a reduction in clipping yields with the inclusion of trinexapac. With no traffic. When you see there is traffic, okay, this is the yes. So now we're looking at these yeses here when it says traffic, yes and yes. What they're expecting, or what you would, this is on clipping dry weight. What you would think is, what they're hypothesizing is that the inclusion of trinexapac might increase the recovery of damage. So you might see more higher turf quality or increased tillering from the inclusion of trinexapac under traffic. Now this is clipping dry weight, but that's what you keep that in mind as we're going through this. Traffic obviously reduced clipping yields across everything. With no trinexapac, clipping or traffic reduced clippings tremendously, regardless of the nitrogen rate. Okay, when you included trinexapac into the traffic, again you see reductions across the board. You don't see much different. These are all C's and C's and C's and C's. These are all the same. There's a little bit, they're all the same, except for in the August and September. So in the latter part of the summer, you see that the inclusion of trinexapac reduced the clipping yields even more than the non-inclusion of trinexapac. So if under traffic, if you included trinexapac at 1 pound N, you reduce the clippings even further at 1, 2, 3, and 4 pounds. So in other words, you're really, really shutting the turf grass down when you have trinexapac on it, and it was trafficked in the latter part of the summer into the fall under any nitrogen rate. It's basically shutting it down. Huge. We're talking differences between 21 kilograms per hectare down to 5. Okay, at the 4 pound N rate, and from 22 down to 3 at the 1 pound N rate. Really, really shutting it down. Okay. So that was the clipping dry weight. You can see here on the graph, this is a graph of the clipping dry weight, where the 2 traffic treatments are down here and the non-traffic treatments are these 2 lines up here. And you can see that on the y-axis, we're looking at clipping dry weight from 0 to 35 grams per meter. And on the x-axis, we're looking at weeks after treatment from 0 to 7, or 1 to 6. And so what you see under traffic, when you have no trinexapac, you're actually seeing more clipping dry weight at the beginning, and you're seeing less clipping dry weight at the beginning when you include trinexapac under traffic. Okay, and of course, traffic up here is going to reduce it compared to no traffic. That's what it's pretty simple. Now let's look at root mass. There were no treatment effects on Kentucky bluegrass root mass measured in 95 at the 0 to 20 centimeter depth. Increased root mass was measured due to traffic in October 96 versus no traffic. Increased root mass. So when there's traffic, you increase the root mass. So there's an example of, you don't necessarily want to just jump in with both feet when you hear something. Oh, what increased root mass? I want to increase root mass. Well, it was traffic. What are you going to do? You're going to go out there and run a bunch of soccer players over your turf to get more root mass? So just be careful what you ask for. Okay, so alternatively, traffic was associated with decreased 0 to 20 centimeter root mass on no trinexapac plots in 97. There were no main or interactive effects of nitrogen on root mass during the course of this study. There were also no treatment effects on the 21 to 40 centimeters or the 41 to 60 centimeter root depth mass. So there really wasn't a whole lot going on with root mass. Okay? Not a whole lot, unless it was due to traffic, not due to the trinexapac. Okay? Yeah. The 0 to 20 centimeters, there wasn't even an effect due to the nitrogen. Even the nitrogen didn't affect the root mass. Yeah, so anyway, tiller density. So this is the recovery or the spreading of the turfgrass. Analysis of variance indicated that N increased tiller density in 95, okay, but had no effect in 96 and 97. At the end of 1996 and 97 treatment periods, traffic had significantly thinned Kentucky bluegrass tiller density, table 3. I'm going to show this. A little bit confused on table 3, but I'll show it anyway. Further, trinexapac treatment resulted in higher tiller density in 96. In 97, there was no difference between trinexapac and traffic alone treatment. So this table here, I guarantee you I'm going to mess this up. I'm going to do it anyway because it's the only table, the only data they show on tillers. And I know that's sort of a foundational concept on this paper is that if you're going to recover from traffic, you have to have more tillers. Okay? But I guarantee you I'm going to screw this up. Let's do the easy part first. I'm going to zoom in on this. If I can get it all on the screen here, I can. Okay. The easy part first is October 95. There was no effect at all from trinexapac or from traffic. Okay. So it didn't matter. There was no effect on tiller density. Tiller density, whether you applied trinexapac or not, or whether you trafficked it or not. Okay. Now, when you go, and the next thing is easy too. October 96, you'll see the star here meaning there was effect of trinexapac, and these two stars here meaning there was a very significant effect of traffic. So when there was no traffic, when there was traffic here, when there was no traffic, there was more tillering. When there was traffic, there was less. 277 tillers per square decimeter compared to 177. So you reduce the tillers by about a third by trafficking them, by trafficking the plots. When you applied trinexapac, you increased when there was no trinexapac, it was 200. When you applied trinexapac, you increased it to 250, basically, tillers per square decimeter. So again, a significant increase in tillers. So these main effects, you're seeing something. There was no interaction in 96. But in 97, I didn't even highlight this because I don't even think you can even use these data because of this right here. There's a trinexapac by traffic interaction. But down here in the notes, it says that I'm just going to read this because I don't understand it enough. I'm probably going to screw it up. So I'm just going to read it word for word. In 97, trinexapac times traffic mean, so the interaction between trinexapac and traffic, the means for 97 are not presented in this table, as traffic was the dominant effect in this interaction. So you can see that in the F statistic for you statistical purists out there. Then they show the F statistics in a prior table. So what they're saying is that they didn't show the data, probably because it didn't format up nice and clean, but they're saying that the traffic was the dominant effect. And I'm assuming they're basing that off the F statistic. And then it has a little bit more detail. It says, with equivalent tiller densities for the for the trinexapac plus traffic versus the no trinexapac plus traffic. So when there was traffic, whether you had trinexapac or not, the tiller density was the same in 1997. And then when you did not have traffic, so when you had traffic, there was no effect of the PGR. When you did not have traffic, there was also no effect of the PGR in 97 on tiller density. I believe I'm reading that correctly. Okay. So in short, in the first 95, there was no effect of the PGR on tiller density. In 97, there was no effect of the PGR on tiller density. In 96, there was. So there's not a real strong indication that, in fact, PGRs, or at least this particular PGR, is having a consistent impact on the tiller density of Kentucky bluegrass. I could be wrong. My voice is starting to go. I'm going to have to end this pretty quick here, guys. I could be wrong. But I know that's a pretty common presupposition with the use of trinexapac, is that you're going to increase tiller density, you're going to increase the runners, and you're going to increase lateral regrowth. And I'm sure there's data in papers that support that. I'm pretty sure. I'm not a PGR literature expert, but I'm pretty sure there's some literature on that. And on Kentucky bluegrass in Fort Collins, Colorado, in this particular study, they didn't see that under traffic. Okay, so let's get to the quality. Analysis of variance indicated that traffic had the greatest effect on reducing 6-week average turfgrass quality, and most likely accounted for much of the significant reported for the trinexapac times traffic interaction. Quality was reduced by traffic to an equivalent level, whether the bluegrass was treated or not with trinexapac across all treatment cycles in 96 and 97. Let me repeat that again. Quality was reduced by traffic to an equivalent level, whether the bluegrass had trinexapac on it or whether it did not in 96, 97. So trinexapac wasn't helping at all, essentially, as long as there was traffic. Okay. Bluegrass quality under non-trafficked conditions and trinexapac was equivalent to that of no trinexapac. No traffic at every in rate and in every treatment cycle of the experiment. So it doesn't seem like in this case trinexapac's having much of a benefit in terms of quality at all. Okay, whether it was trafficked or not trafficked. Good evening, Mitch Bird. Good evening, Joe and Transition Guy and Rob and Mike, all you guys. Good evening. I didn't say hello earlier, sorry. Discussion. The results indicate that trinexapac consistently reduced clipping production by 1 to 2 weeks after treatment, with a maximum suppression occurring at 4 weeks after treatment. Okay, so that's pretty consistent. That's what I would expect at 4 ounces per acre. And the other studies were, I think, were on bent grass. It was a different species, and we're still seeing about 4 weeks of suppression. And it can be substantial. By more than 50%, you can see a reduction in growth clipping yield. So that can happen. That's probably going to happen as long as you apply it at the right rate, the right time. So I would bank on that. Okay. Let me, so that was one of the discussion points, but let me show this table here, because this is the table on quality ratings. And it just says what I said earlier. There was no differences in 95 on this particular rating dates, but then look, you'll see this is again, no traffic and no traffic with trinexapac. And you don't see any differences. So whether it had trinexapac or not, if there was no traffic, they were all the same. These are all A's. These are all A's. These are all A's. Okay, these are all the same. Then when you have, that's with no traffic. Then when you have with traffic, which is these two here, these are all the same. B's and B's, B's and B's, B's and B's. There's no differences between these. There's differences whether it was trafficked or not. So again, you're going to start messing with hormones and messing with stuff in the plant. That's fine. But it's the abiotic injury that is the primary cause of the reduction in quality. Just like I have on that triangle. That's one reason why it's below fertile soil. Because it's the damage, the abiotic and biotic injury that causes this more than likely than fertile soil. Okay, we continue on the discussion. Turf manager, here's some really good discussion points. Let me see how many of these I have. Yeah, there's only like a couple paragraphs left and we're done. There's some really good discussion points here. And that's one reason why, I don't know if it's one reason, but this is an indication why, Dr. Irvin and Tony Koski have been rock stars for so dang long. Okay? If you have good results, write good conclusions, write good discussions. I mean, you can be assertive with your language as long as you have the results to back it up. And they do that here. Turf managers would be advised to apply trinexapac monthly to achieve continuous growth inhibition and avoid the post-inhibition flush of growth, which has been noted to occur at 5 to 6 weeks. So he's giving you a very clean and clear best management practice that is supported by more than one paper. And this is what people do nowadays. Remember, this was written 20 years ago, but nowadays this is all standard. Apply about 4 ounces of, in this particular case, trinexapac on Kentucky Bluegrass. Applied about every 3 to 4 months. 3 to 4 weeks. I would say maybe 4 to 5 weeks. About every month, 4 to 5 weeks. Because if you don't, you're going to see this massive flux of growth. And if you can actually play the calendar right and actually plan that, you might want that extra growth. Like, let's say you have a massive party or a bunch of football players and you really, really want a lot of growth. You can actually achieve that by scheduling the trinexapac-ethyl 5 weeks prior, 6 weeks prior, because it'll come out of that and start really, really growing. But if you don't want that, then you need to schedule your applications accordingly and keep it suppressed. Repeated applications of trinexapac did not affect Kentucky Bluegrass root mass at any of the depths sampled. So I get this question. I got this question before I started down the PGR literature road about roots. A lot of them from members, and I can't answer those questions. I'm not a PGR specialist. I don't know squat about PGRs. But this has been shown 2 or 3 of the publications where they did not have an effect on root mass. Okay, I'm sure there's literature. I may have even covered 1 or 2 papers that also show there was a little bit of effect on root mass, but it's certainly not a consensus like there would be on clipping reduction. That's a consensus. You're going to see that more. You're very, very confident you're going to see a reduction in clipping mass, clipping volume. But this idea that you're going to consistently see a change in root mass, increase or decrease, you're going to see an increase or decrease in root tillering or whatever the case is, that's not a slam dunk at all. As expected, traffic consistently reduced clipping dry weights across all 3 years of the study. Traffic coupled with trinexapac applications often resulted in the greatest clipping dry weight reductions, especially during the periods of highest trinexapac-induced suppression. Give me 1 minute. 1 second. Okay, I'm back. Sorry. My lovely wife just came back in the door. I love everybody here, but it's, not a comparison when it comes to her, so I got to say hello. Okay. So, next a couple paragraphs and we're done. Higher annual rates of slowly available nitrogen. So this paragraph is going to attempt to explain why they didn't see what they expected to see. And it's okay. I mean, it's, they might be right. Like I mentioned at the beginning of the paper, they could be right. In my experience with these methylene ureas and urea formaldehydes, I wouldn't use it on a research study because I want to have more confidence that what I applied is actually going to result in a consistent response. And if you want to talk about inconsistent responses, that's what you're going to see in the literature for methylene ureas and urea formaldehydes. But we'll read this. Higher annual rates of slowly available nitrogen did not play a significant role in tiller density, root mass, or increased quality under traffic. You would expect to see that. You would expect to see increased tiller density. You would expect to see changes in root mass, oftentimes reductions in root mass. You would expect to see increased quality as a result of nitrogen applications, but they didn't see that. Typical responses to increased nitrogen rates are greater tiller density, a decrease in root mass, increased nitrogen rates have been shown to improve well tolerance up to a threshold whereby additional nitrogen may deteriorate it. We can only speculate that the lack of tiller density response to increased nitrogen in our study may have been associated with this previously well-fertilized 5-year-old turf already being at its carrying capacity of optimum density or optimum leaf area index. So I guess what they're saying is it's possible that this particular location was already so juiced up with nitrogen from the prior years that the application of this extra nitrogen in this form didn't have an effect that they expected to see. It's possible. I'm not saying that didn't happen. But you did see an increase in growth from the highest end rate. You didn't see a deficiency in the lowest end rate, granted. In other words, if you didn't apply any nitrogen at all, you probably would have still seen a perfectly fine turf. That's a pretty good indication that you probably shouldn't be doing a nitrogen rate study on that particular location. In other words, if not applying the nitrogen at all comes in with the same response as applying the nitrogen, then clearly the turf grass was being supplied with sufficient N. Okay. And that's oftentimes why you'll see a difference between years. At the beginning of the study on non-treated turf grass, it might take a little while for that turf grass to become depleted or to become deficient in nitrogen. And that's the second and third year where you'll see the responses. In this study, they did it for 2 or 3 years and still didn't see it. Okay. Deficiency symptoms were never observed on plots receiving 1 pound of nitrogen. We speculate that moderately high levels of soil organic matter, 3%, optimum nitrogen fertilization in the 3 years prior to treatment initiation, and the fact that prior to sodding, this field had been in continuous alfalfa production for many years may have resulted in enough yearly nitrogen mineralization to reduce any potential nitrogen treatment effect. It's possible. I would just say that the nitrogen source that you used is so unpredictable and extremely slow sometimes, particularly in northern Colorado, that what you would expect to see from nitrogen applications just didn't occur from that nitrogen source. If you applied a soluble nitrogen source or a more soluble nitrogen source, you might have seen what you expected to see. That would be something to consider. But what do I know? I wasn't there. Root mass may not have been negatively affected by higher annual N rates because the slower release properties of the nitrogen source probably did not overstimulate shoot growth at the expense of root growth. So in other words, you didn't see a change in root growth because you didn't see a great increase in shoot growth, but they did see a little bit of increase in shoot growth, I think from the highest N rate. I can't remember now. And then we got the last 2 paragraphs, which I think were really well worded. I'm going to start writing this way. Seriously. I think the last paper I wrote, oh no, that was a different paper. Maybe it's one of the papers I've written but haven't submitted. I can't remember. I wrote a little bit more assertive language like this. But this is good. I always get a warm feeling when I read this stuff. As long as it's supported by the results, I'm good with it. You'll see some of this stuff worded in like journals like Nature or Science, where they kind of want like a little inflammatory language, a little bit bold statements. They kind of want that in those journals, even if they're not supported by the results sometimes. In this, you can't get away with it. You can't get away with that in crop science unless you have really, really good sound results to support it. In summary, our data does not fully support our working hypothesis that reductions in shoot growth due to trinexapac would result in greater tiller density and root mass under non-traffic conditions. Now, you don't get any more clear than that. Under non-traffic conditions, so normal conditions, the application of trinexapac did not result in greater tiller density or root mass. So there it is. A further hypothesis, however, was that increased tiller density under traffic would result in improved quality. So the idea is, like I've mentioned, is that you have a lot of damage, you've reduced vertical growth, are you increasing lateral growth, and is there increased quality under that scenario? And so it would result in improved quality. Greater tiller density due to trinexapac under traffic was not measured. They didn't find that. This result, in combination with reduced quality of trafficked trinexapac plots in 97, implies a rejection of this second hypothesis. So trinexapac isn't really doing well in this particular study in terms of under traffic or non-traffic in terms of increasing quality. Continual traffic on trinexapac-ethyl suppressed leaf blades with little tissue removal and regrowth following mowing resulted in more cumulative wear on blades within the canopy, hence the visual reduction in quality relative to the control. In the last sentence, additionally, because of a lack of nitrogen response on quality, our results do not provide any evidence for our hypothesis that growth suppression due to trinexapac will allow for the maintenance of high-quality turf with reduced annual inputs. So if you want to reduce the growth rate, the idea is, well, I might not need enough in. I might not need to supply as much in because I'm reducing the growth rate. They didn't see that in this. The idea of, well, maybe I can get increased recovery from traffic when I'm applying trinexapac with increased lateral growth. They didn't find that in this study. Doesn't mean it won't happen. It just means that they didn't find any evidence in this particular study to support that. So they didn't see any evidence in this study to support increased tiller density at all with trinexapac or increased root growth with trinexapac. Nothing. So this is the only thing that, again, is consistent with these PGRs, particularly trinexapac, is you are almost certainly going to see a reduction in clipping yield. That much is almost guaranteed. But the idea of, oh no, I'm going to increase lateral growth, I'm going to increase tiller density, and I'm going to increase root growth, or I'm going to increase traffic recovery, all that stuff, it may or may not happen, but there's nowhere near the consistency in the literature to have any real confidence in that statement. It could. Certainly it's in the realm of a possibility that there's probably a paper that'll show that, but there's probably a paper that'll show it won't happen. Okay. But you'd be hard pressed to read anything in the literature where trinexapac was applied at the labeled rate and you did not see a reduction in clipping yield. You were going to see that. Okay. All right, guys and gals. That's the last show before Thanksgiving. I want to thank all you for supporting the channel. Thank you all for showing up each day and listening to my meanderings. I had a good, interesting show this morning. If you guys haven't listened to that show, I lost control of my ability to speak. I was laughing so hard on the show this morning. So that was fun. But in all sincerity, thank you for showing up. Thank you for spending some of your life with me. And hopefully there's some good information you take out of some of the content I produce. And you can turn that into a more efficient and more fulfilling career in turfgrass science. So again, thank you all. Have a great Thanksgiving. I'll be back on Monday morning with another PGR paper on anew, which is a different PGR than what I've gone over. Thanks so much, guys and gals. Appreciate it. Have a happy Thanksgiving. See you Monday. Bye.